Yes,
Hey,
hear me. Hey,
how's it going, buddy?
good. How are you doing? It's been a while.
It has been quite a while. I think like what, 10 years?
It's closer to 15.
Oh man, time flies when you're getting old, right?
Uh, Here, let me do my favorite plant background.
Oh, was that at the Botanical Garden Center when they did that?
Yes,
I love that.
yes.
Oh, I had such a good time when I went. It was great.
Yeah, yeah. I actually got to go to this one for free because I brought my family with me, and then we got to talk it up on social media. So the 5 people that followed me on Twitter got to hear about
Oh, very cool. Well, that's 5 people that
it.
get to go have a cool experience because of you now.
I would hope so.
No, it was so fun. I had such a good time. I went by myself and I was just like in outer space, like woo. It was good. It was a good time. Well, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come talk to me and
Oh,
interview
not at
me.
all.
Yeah, well, and me interview you, but just catch up. How have you been? Like, how's life been?
So, how's life been? Crazy, crazy. My today's actually my daughter's 19th birthday. So, yeah, I mean, I watched them grow up. That was crazy. There's nothing that you learned as a boy growing up that will help you raise a daughter. There's just nothing. you know, I mean, you think about it, most of the way we do things is, it's like I always say with teaching, I teach my classes the way I was taught, and then you figure out that's wrong. And that's how we parent too, right? Right? We kind of fall back to either what we liked of our own parents or what we didn't like. And I came to realize like I got nothing. I really got fucking nothing.
They left you an
And
empty playbook, huh?
well, and not only that, but I mean, my parents were old when they had me. So like my father was a World War II veteran. My mother was about 9, 10 years old when the Russian tanks rolled into her hometown of Berlin to end World War II. So they had a little bit different of a parenting perspective than is perhaps legal today.
That might have to be a little bit more capital in it. Like,
Yeah, yeah. The whole spare the rod and spoil the child thing. We don't. That's not us anymore. So that was a challenge. In terms of work is going, I'm actually at a point at work where I get to do a lot of things I enjoy, and I mean, I may not have all the authority in the world, but I have enough that I can actually not listen to my supervisors and get away with it.
that's the
You
best.
know?
It's when you've reached peak perfection because you don't have too much expectation on you to do anything, and you have just
hmm
enough wiggle room to do whatever you want, and then ask for forgiveness later. It's great. I've been there in
Oh,
corporate.
I don't even ask for forgiveness. I'm like, yeah, I did it.
Do something about it. What are you gonna do about it?
You gonna fire me? I mean, what really gives you freedom is this last September, I finally hit the point where I could actually apply for and get a full retirement tomorrow.
Really? So
Yes, I
you
mean,
literally have like fuck you walking away retirement money. You're like, do it.
like, what are you gonna do, fire me? And then it's like you all know that I have worked myself into a place where I'm the only person who teaches your plant classes. You have a whole major environmental science that requires a certain number of plant classes. What are you gonna do? you know.
That's
So
amazing. Congratulations. That's got to be like
yeah,
peak contentment with your job.
it is and it isn't. I mean, I still have to work with an administration that God, like if they're not on drugs, they make me want to take drugs. And not fun ones, but like serious Thorazine style tranquilizers.
Like, if I'm
But
not in a K hole at work, then my administration isn't doing their job.
that's
Essentially.
right. But no, we've got some really neat projects on campus. So we finally, after like 20 years of trying, hoodwinked the administration to letting us build a community garden. I actually got I'm a co-PI on a USDA grant, so I got through that grant about $10,000 to spend on the garden. So now we have like 12 raised beds. We've got a whole crop growing. My students, who I make them run it, I'm just like, no, I'm not robbing this train. I just hold the horses. And they've actually gone out and found somebody who's willing to give us like $6,000 worth of fruit trees.
Oh,
But the administration's like, we don't want anything permanent, blah, 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 permanent. And so, like, I have a meeting scheduled for Monday morning where I'm like, okay, this is what they've done. We can leave these trees in boxes. They don't have to be permanent, but you now have an opportunity to make a garden that could be really a keystone attraction at this campus for free. And I know that's a word ASU really likes, free, you know, almost as much as your tuition.
That's
Right.
fascinating to me because even U of A has like a legacy garden down there where they have all the trees that they've planted for their environmental
And the
science
Tempe
stuff.
campus does, and the Polytech campus does, and the downtown campus does, and finally the West Valley campus does. So, you know, it's an ongoing fight, but I mean, you know, it's a fun fight because I know I can't really lose, right? You know, it's like you're not going to get rid of this garden, and if you do, oh, I'm going to make a big stink. Um, and I may actually end up, you know, being part of a legacy that lasts for decades in terms of education, assuming, of course, we don't destroy civilization in the next 20 years. You know, make the sign of the intersection, pray it doesn't happen.
I've had one of my favorite memories of you I was going to bring up on this interview was we
Mm.
were in class one day and I was just becoming collapse aware and being like, oh yeah, you know, the world might end while I'm here because of climate change and water wars and all this stuff. And I was just like, you know, what do we have to worry about? He looked at me like, oh, water. No, it's like, fuck everything else. It's going to be water. In 25 years, we'll start to see people squabbling over water. And I looked at you and I'm like, how do you deal with that? Like that stress, that like doom thing stress. And you're just like, I just drink a lot of whiskey. I think
I've
about that all the
actually
time. It's one of my favorite
I,
stories.
I've actually had to I've actually had to give up alcohol
Me too. Yeah, me too.
as a coping mechanism. But you know, I do research in the cannabis realm these days, and actual research along with personal experimentation.
Oh, okay. So I had so many questions that I was going to ask you about. I'm going to side. Let's talk about the cannabis research because I know that
Sure, sure,
people
sure.
that follow me would love to hear that. I'm also big into that. So
Hmm.
let's go. Tell me about what you got cooking over there.
So we actually just put out a paper, as you know, in about 2018, 2019, the federal government legalized hemp. And what happened is you had a bunch of farmers like in the Yuma area who are like, we can grow high CBD hemp. We can basically grow a drug price, you know, or we can grow a commodity crop and get drug prices. And so there was this huge boom of high CBD hemp, and then within 2 years it collapsed to nothing. And so we did a paper that analyzed that boom and bust. And I mean, what it turned out for the most part is there was no one in Arizona that could process it. That could actually take that crop and pull the CBD off it so you could sell it to someone else. But there were all the other problems too. Like, you know, if you're a corn farmer, you buy a corn seed from Monsanto or whoever, you practically know every nucleotide in that corn's genome. It is so heavily regulated. If you're buying industrial hemp from Dave, Dave may have ran out of that strain, but you want it, so he'll take another strain label. And so there was just no consistency in the genetics of what they were growing. They didn't understand things like day length and how that affected when it's flowering. And the thing is, so high CBD hemp is kind of a misnomer. The plant will start making THC. And so you have to harvest it before it gets over 0.3% because that's the legal limit. Interestingly enough, in writing this paper, I traced that back to a 1978 taxonomy paper where these two taxonomists, and this is still the taxonomy paper that defines cannabis as a single species. It says, we're just going to make up this number and that's what we're going to call it. And so there's like no justification other than we need a number. Well, here out of my ass, 0.3%. But if you let the hemp grow too long, it will exceed 0.3%. Yeah, and so we analyze that. Now, what's even interesting about that still is I'm not sure you're in Indiana, Illinois.
I'm in Indiana where it's illegal,
Indiana.
but because of that hemp law, we actually get low grade THC products sold at gas stations.
Right, right. And that's where they all come from. Like the other about a month ago, my wife brings me home this 4-pack of THC soda from a liquor store. And I'm like, how is that legal? They don't have a dispensary license. And then of course you look it up. Well, it turns out that is a huge market. Those gas station cartridges. We call it a gray market. Some of my colleagues are actually analyzing those for contaminants and the like. And what I thought was interesting. So I was in the lab while one of the lab techs is pulling the resin out of the carts and dissolving it in toluene, you know, for the gas chromatography. And you look at those things, and there's not even a uniform color to it. There's like a gradient. Like it's not even mixed right. I'm like, that scares me. So well, I kind of stay away from that kind of stuff. Um, the other research that I do in hemp, it's funny. I was joking with a friend of mine. I'm like, in my high school days, I loved heavy metal. In my college days, I loved cannabis. I've figured out a way to combine them in research, but it's not what you think. We're actually looking at how hemp can pull heavy metal pollution out of soil. So it's only heavy metal in name, and it certainly is not anything you'd want to smoke. But we just actually finished working on a database paper. So we had a graduate student in what's called the biological data sciences master's degree program, and she literally went and read something like 300 different papers on how 4 different plants, industrial hemp, sunflowers, castor bean, and bamboo, can actually pull elemental pollution out of the soil. And we, from that, constructed a database, analyzed all of the data, and looked at, what elements are the most effective and what parts of the plant are those elements getting sequestered into. It turns out phytoremediation in and of itself will probably never be used because it's too slow and it's too weak. But if I could grow hemp that pulled, say, the lead out of the ground and left it in the leaves, but be able to harvest the seeds and refine the seed oil out of that for a lubricant, then I've got 2 different profit centers off of that crop. That might make it actually worthwhile to do. But otherwise, just the rate at which these plants pull metals out of the soil is just, it's not enough to really make a lot of people engage in that. Now, the funny thing is, it's like, okay, if you don't want to clean it up that way, how do you suggest cleaning it up? Oh, you want to scoop all the dirt, put it in a truck, take it to a processing plant where you're going to try to chemically process it. Tell me how much that costs again.
I
you
want to do
know,
dirt dialysis, like literally just do that.
basically, yeah. Or taking the contaminated dirt and putting it in a landfill and bringing in new clean dirt. So I mean, this is the thing, and I mean, it is so much easier to prevent pollution than it is to clean it up afterwards. And someday, I promise humans will learn that. Maybe not in my lifetime. Maybe not in your lifetime. Maybe not ever. We're just not that smart.
I'm keeping out a little bit of hope. Ever since I quit the juice, I'm like, let's be hopeful and not just be like, yeah, no, we'll destroy ourselves. Our level of intelligence, our bar is just so low now. It's James Cameron in the ocean. That's really cool. So phytochemical remediation through cannabis.
Phytoremediation. Yeah.
That's crazy. I was a long time ago. I was doing a lot of eco sustainability research because I wanted to build my own earthship. I was really to cut it, like Cody Lundane. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I wanted to do that. I'm like, oh, mycology and remediation through mycology. We could do with all the mushrooms. So that was a fun little rabbit hole I went down to. But again, like nobody's ever going to find that profitable, as you mentioned. I didn't even think about the profitable part of it because no one can eat contaminated mushrooms, even if they're
Right.
fast growing.
Well, and even if I had 1,000 studies that showed you the lead is only in the leaves and the seeds are perfectly clean, still no one's going to eat it because it's about perception. It's about how we perceive things. You know, Even if you could say use the fibers from the stalks to make a shirt, nobody's going to want to do that. Even if I can show you there is no lead in this shirt, they're like, but that was people are just like that. And so that's why we were looking at, and we were thinking about things like, well, could you use that hemp oil as a machine lubricant? Because I'm sorry, if I'm if I'm driving a diesel truck or if I'm working in a massive factory system, I'm not concerned about that, especially like if it's a factory that say is making acid batteries. So we're already dealing with lead. We don't have to worry about that. So we looked into stuff like that, and that I mean, it's one of the things that I've learned in like my work with climate change and my work in the environment is, cleaning up the world is a really nice thing, but nobody's going to do it unless they can make money off it. And so it's like preventing climate change or slowing it down. It's not going to happen out of the goodness of our hearts. It's happening because solar power is so much cheaper and wind power is so much cheaper that's what people are doing because it makes economic sense. And I hate to put it that way. I would like to think people could be better and be like, it would be nice to give our grandchildren a habitable world. We don't care. I need to make $1 million.
They can't even give us habitable house pricing. Like, they rolled the ladder up for older. Yeah. So
I my daughters have been out of high school for a year. They're not ready for college. They got to figure the world out. But my wife and I were talking about it one day. Like, do you think they're going to move out? And then they build this little apartment complex right by our house, right? So if you remember Phoenix, about 15th Avenue in Osborne,
mm.
And it's a cute little place. I mean, it's got little garages, little 2 stores, and the sign goes up, starting rent $24.99 a month. And I'm like, what kind of job can an 18-year-old get and pay that kind of, even half that rent? I'm like, we don't have to worry, babe. They ain't moving out. You know?
We're gonna have them until they're 45 and the world ends or we nuke each other.
Yeah, well, we're just gonna leave them the house.
That is crazy. I before I lost my job, so what I was doing before this, before I got on TikTok and decided to go back into my science roots, is I was a sales executive. So one of
Mhm.
the big career paths that I took is I started working in call centers, and I worked my way up into management, which there is a special place in hell for me. So I'm working to atone for being a call center manager for so long because that is a horrible job. Tried to do nice while I was there, but I made it all the way up to like a sales VP executive level. And then I got let go. I was making 6 figures, and I was living in Goodyear in these little bungalow 1 bedroom apartments that weren't really apartments. They had like little backyards. So they didn't have anybody above you, just somebody
Right.
next to you. My last month there was $2,400 before I got priced out because I got let go. I couldn't make enough money to afford to live there. I mean, this isn't counting utilities, it's not like my car insurance. I'm like, okay, I just have to pay $3,200 a month just to wake up and breathe and have a car, and have power. Okay, this is
That's nuts.
so the
That's nuts.
post-capitalism hellscape or whatever they call it.
I never worked in a well, I did work for about a week in a call center when I was really young, but I actually worked for 6 months at U-Haul's roadside emergency service line. And you want to talk about the worst call center job on the planet? I still remember U-Haul roadside emergency service. My name is Ken, and I can help you. Mute. I can't fucking help you. you know, like, that's what I felt like saying because so many times it's like I'm gonna call a tow truck. Sure, they'll get there at some point, you
Anytime
know.
between 9 a.m. and 10 p.m., maybe tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was doing that job because it was at a time in my life I was trying to get an ecotour company started, and I could work that job from 4 a.m. to 9 a.m., which is not a good time to work. But if you're trying to do normal business things, that helps. I actually ended up pulling a shift on New Year's Eve, and I swear every tow truck driver I dispatched was hammered. And I'm like, am I legally responsible? Am I going to get in trouble? This all happened over 20 years ago. So I'm not worried about statute of limitations anymore. But, you're just like, and of course, there's this voice in the back of your head saying, is this job really worth $6 an hour? you know?
Oh, they paid you back then with $6. Oh, that hurts. Oh,
Hey, that was a couple bucks above minimum back in the 90s.
that's crazy to think about. Like I was making, as a manager, I think I was making 20. I can't tell you how many people have had to fire because they didn't have their mute button on. Like you were like, I can't fucking help you. Yeah, I had somebody. I had to fire somebody one day because he got a German guy on the phone for Nike.com. He's calling in about returning shoes, and the guy forgot to mute himself. And he said, "Oh, this guy's last name sounds like he was with Hitler in Germany." Like, I was like, "Did you really just say that to somebody?" I was gonna fire him. But that's hysterical, though. You're just like, "Am I a co-conspirator? Am I gonna get?" Like legally in trouble, civilly in trouble if they go out and they hit a bunch of people.
Yeah, I mean, if a bartender can get sued for over serving somebody, um, and because the call was recorded, it's not like when it went to court, people like, didn't you think he was drunk? Well, how do he sound? No, 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 drunk. I'm like, be really hard to say. No, he sounds sober, totally sober.
Just be like, maybe they all have speech impediments tonight. Maybe those are the only people that work. Who knows?
That's
I
right.
did.
That's right.
I did have a couple questions I really wanted to ask
Sure,
you
sure.
before we go into this. That cannabis story you reminded me of, or the
Hmm.
I'm all over the place. We had a tornado hit me a couple days ago. I've never been through a tornado. It's been severe weather ever since. It was cool. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of really have always wanted to be in a tornado, but once you're in there, you're like, oh, this is some fun. I might die. But so I'm just like my
That's what I
brain's.
hear people are like. They think it's a cool idea until they experience, it, and then they're like, holy shit.
You told me one story back when I was in college that really stuck with me, and it reminded me of the 0.03% cannabis thing or 3%.
Hmm.
And it's when they planted jojoba in the desert and they didn't realize they were
Yes.
male and female plants. Yeah, they destroyed.
Yes.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh, that cracked me up. Okay, so one of the questions I really wanted to ask you was, what are some of your favorite plant facts and why?
So honestly, some of my favorite plant facts this week, because it changes all the time. I'm reading this new book called The Light Eaters, and it's actually a book on, nobody wants to call it this, but this is what we're starting to talk about, is plant intelligence.
Mm.
Plants have an ability to communicate, we're learning, and we never figured it out because they don't talk. They actually put out very small amounts of these chemicals that can either signal other plants. And so, like, if we're all say grass in a field, and you get attacked by an aphid, you can put out a chemical and it warns everyone else, and everyone else then starts priming their defenses. You could also put out a chemical that attracts the insects that eat the aphids. We're also starting to see in experimental ways that some plants have an ability to remember past events and use that to affect current decisions. And so nobody wants to call this plant intelligence, mostly because there was that book in the 70s, The Secret Life of Plants, that turned out to be, I mean, I tried to read it, I really did. And it was just so full of, here's a technical term, masculine bovine feces, that I had to put it down. And it's got to be a bad plant book if I can't finish it, right? um, but what I like about that is it's starting to push us to question what we mean by intelligence, because we've always defined intelligence as our intelligence. And that's a little speciesist, if I may say so, you know? Just a little bit, just a little bit. And it's an animal-based intelligence. Like, a plant's not going to have a similar intelligence because a plant doesn't deal with the same kinds of decisions. A plant never decides to run away. you
They can't
know,
move. The only thing it
it,
does is it has, the responses to
right,
sunlight and how it grows,
right,
or to wind.
right. Plus, you and I, we have a brain, we have a centralized nervous system. Plants, it appear, have decision-making centers at every meristem. So every meristem, every place cells are dividing, is in fact, I mean, we don't want to call it a little brain, because that's kind of crazy sounding, but it is a decision center. It is a place where decisions are made. And so to me, it really starts asking us, what do we mean by intelligence? What is intelligence? Are there different ways of intelligence? And are we the only intelligent creature on this planet? And obviously we're not. In fact, we may not be an intelligent creature, but that's part of our previous discussion. So I'm really enjoying that book. Um, One of the other books I found a few years ago that I'm enjoying a lot, along the same lines, it's actually called Eating the Sun. So again, the whole plant theme. But this book actually, it covers the history of the discovery of photosynthesis and how the biochemists and all that unlock the different steps. And I mean, it's got some crazy crap, like the first Berkeley lab where they're literally discovering what radioactive isotopes are, and they're using these to trace photosynthesis. The isotopes have such a short half-life. The guy makes it, then he's got to bike to his lab, give the isotopes to his partner, and then go take a shower and throw his clothes in a can where they have to sit for like 6 months or whatever until they're not hot anymore. And so, this is how we started. And when you read how they made this radioactive carbon, they basically put ammonium nitrate fertilizer around a neutron source. And I'm reading that and I'm going, that's a dirty bomb. That is literally what today you would be arrested for making a dirty bomb. It's radiation surrounded by explosives. But the 50s were a simpler time.
Science used to be a much more badass. Like that one guy that infected himself with syphilis to bring it over. No, it was H. pylori bacteria. That's what it was. He gave
Yes,
himself
yes.
his own. Yep, and then he had to travel with it to prove it. I'm like, we were much more badass than we were, or than we are today. I mean,
It's because of people like EH&S, ASU's Environmental Health and Safety, that we've done this. Oh, I kid you not. I had to, all I wanted was a nice room to grow some plants in on campus. I can't use the shared lab space because they're doing all this microbiology stuff in there, and they're like, soil has bacteria. I'm like, well, yes, it's soil. You can't do that in here. Okay. So just to get this room, and it's not a lab, it can't be a lab because it doesn't have a shower, it just has a sink. I had to go through like 3 different departments, all these different permits, and literally like, well, what chemicals are you using? I'm not using chemicals. I'm using soil. My soil is a mixture of potting soil, sand, and perlite. So I get permission, but literally I'm told you need to wear gloves, goggles, and a lab coat because these could all be skin irritants. I'm like, really? Really? Is that how you garden? I'm like, so yeah.
I was going to ask you one of the things that you really like about teaching, one of the things that you don't like about dealing with like higher education. And, I'm going to say that this is the thing is going through the administration for every little thing and the bureaucracy that makes it impossible to do.
It it is and it isn't. I mean, one of the things you have to remember about environmental health and safety is the vast majority of those regulations exist because at some point someone did something horrible
Yeah.
and somebody got hurt or somebody got killed and somebody sat down and said, "How do we make sure this never happens again?" Well, we do this. But it's not organized. And honestly, sometimes the people who are wielding that power, it goes to their head, and so, but what do you expect from a bureaucracy? I mean, you worked at a large corporation. Anytime you have large organizations and you give people authority, some people don't use it appropriately. I mean,
You do
that's
very well with it. I'm like, yeah, this is where you belong. Oh yeah, yeah.
but but that if that's the worst thing I have to say about my day, I'm having a good day. I get to work with students, I get to work with plants. I get to see this next generation coming into maturity and hopefully going out and doing great things. Um, I get to sometimes annoy administrators. That's always fun.
It's a bonus. That is a bonus.
I mean, I must have done something right. They haven't let me come to a faculty meeting in like 10 years. It's coincidence. No, you have to teach on Thursday afternoons, Ken. We cannot figure out a schedule. So and I'm like, okay, all right, I'm fine.
I can be flexible. Yeah, I'll teach that time. No problem.
I'm
Look at me going over
fine.
to bend over backwards for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't need to show up to this. That's great.
Oh, you're recording the faculty meetings on Zoom and I can watch them later? Yeah, I'll get right on that.
You have so many important things in these meetings that we have to go over. Thank you so much. Oh my God. I want to I want to go back to plant intelligence because that is also
Yes.
my favorite thing that we're like getting
Hmm.
into.
Hmm.
Oh, this idea that they can sense their environment. I think I read something a while back about certain types of photoreceptors in plant cells too, where they kind of
Yep.
see like we do. It is crazy to me to have something sit there for hundreds to thousands of years, never be able to move, but be able to externally sense their environment, and they can make decisions. They have the
Right.
capacity to index higher level thinking by recognizing like, hey, it's an aphid eating me. I have to call it this specific predator with this specific pheromone. They have a
Hmm.
catalog of
Hmm.
hundreds. Like one of my favorite plant facts to tell people and ruin their day is anytime they're cutting grass, I'm like, that smell is the grass screaming, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's literally the grass screaming. And their senses are so much different from ours. It appears that like you were saying, I got to recognize the difference of what's eating me. It appears it's done all by the sound vibrations. The chewing of an aphid's mouth has a different acoustic signature than the chewing of a beetle's mouth. And we can't tell the difference. Our ears never evolved to hear that, but the plant can and somehow does this at the cellular level. It doesn't have an ear, right? It doesn't have a nose or a mouth or any of those sense organs that we think about. It's all somehow integrated into the cellular mechanics and it senses this at a cellular level. And this is why I think it's taken us so long to understand it, is because it is radically different approach to interacting with reality than animals do. And I'm not saying we're biased, but go look at science. How many articles are there on humans and how many articles are there on pine trees?
I mean,
You
we can
know,
even leverage that to genders. Like, how do they consider the standard, deviation for laboratory results? It's a one dude, middle-aged white dude that they use for
I was
every
gonna
study for
say, you
everything.
mean you mean there are other humans than us old white guys?
Yes, would you believe it? Some of them even come with boobs. No, I don't know.
I'm shocked.
Ah, so the reason I know this too, and this is so frustrating for me, is because a lot of my research now focuses on like immunology and endocrinology. So I
Hmm.
do a lot with that. So if I'm looking up like any kind of hormone stuff when it comes to like brain function, it's just like, oh, I got to dig real deep to find something that actually like fits because it's just Carl over here, Carl, the 35-year-old white guy. Like, I don't know. He's 5'10. He weighs the same standard amount that every dude does, like 180. Oh, it's just terrible. What's really interesting too? I think this is a large part of your influence, but I take an animal behavior lens to everything now, even with plants and bacteria
Hmm.
and fungi. And I study a lot of viruses, and I talk a lot about like viruses, like the effect of the body for infections and what they do to our DNA and epigenetics and all that stuff. And I think that they show behavior like animals too. I think that's why they go for certain things. It's a metabolic resource thing. Like all organisms want to hoard metabolic resources and live and replicate. Like that's
Right,
everything's
right.
on this planet's goal is to eat, fuck, and make babies, right? And from a biological standpoint, we're gonna be like totally nitty gritty about it. So I think like I have a podcast that I think I sent you an episode of my podcast. I like to get
Hmm.
real
Hmm.
like Mary Jane with it, and then I'll go on like rants about how plants have intelligence and how like bacteria and everything has intelligence.
Right, right.
So I'm just like it's so cool to me. Mine Zoom just told me that we're running out of time, but we should still have about 12 minutes. So a couple things that I want to touch on. What would be your advice to incoming students in STEM? New students looking to get into science, botany, all that fun stuff.
So my advice to them would be to think outside the box for a career. Most of like, especially my environmental science majors right now are very, very panicked with the state of the federal government and all of that. So I would say there are tons of roles in STEM. Think outside the box. Be willing to do something like to create your own company, your own resources, your own path. Because the traditional paths, the things that my generation relied on, are no longer stable. And there are ways. I mean, look at what you have done with your online presence and all of that. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, this is what I'm trying to introduce my girls to. But definitely, I mean, science is wonderful. It is, to me, it is humanity's highest pursuit, to understand the world we live in and to hopefully use it to make the human condition better. That's where science becomes good. But you got to find a way to do that that might be different than previous generations. And so I would say, have that wide angle of creativity around. Do not be afraid of new technologies. I mean, a lot of people think AI is horrible. It can be. I've read some really horrible AI written papers from students, and they've paid for it. But it can also be a powerful tool to help you refine your own ideas and to help you search for things. So I would just say, embrace the science. This is humanity at its best, but find new paths and find new ways to move forward in science, because some of the old ways may not be as reliable or stable as they used to be. That would be my biggest advice. And my second biggest advice would be study plants.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Both of those. You're completely right. Like I have a lot of people reach out to me and they're like, why don't you work in the lab? Why don't you do any of the traditional pathways that we do for research? And A, it doesn't fit like a lot of what I do. And B, like I think people have this really rigid idea before they get into STEM and see the wide breadth of stuff that you can do in it, exactly what it entails, right? So there's
Right,
so many
right.
opportunities out there that are non-traditional. You don't have to go into higher academics if you don't want to. Like I was always raised on this whole idea, like you have to get a PhD, you have to publish or die. That's the only way to be in academics. And it's just not that way anymore. There's tons and tons of different ways to share your research and, build communities and all sorts of stuff. So I agree. That's beautiful. It's an awesome piece of advice. Second question I really wanted to cover was for people who are getting into, because the economy's in the shit, right? People are getting into gardening. People want to know local resources to learn how to garden. Do you have any advice for that? Like where they can turn to, who they can hit up?
So I would always look up your local university extension. U of A, yes, I can talk nice about U of A at least once a decade, and this is it. U of A has an incredible, actually, our cannabis paper, one of our co-authors is a U of A agricultural extension professional. So go to your agriculture extension. Find your local, like I just gave presentations to the Arizona Herb Society. And herb societies, like our Arizona Herb Society, it's a bunch of retired people that love to garden, and you get in with them and they're going to give you the best advice because they've been trying to grow things. I mean, I remember one of the herb society meeting I was at, and I forget which pest they were talking about, but this guy's describing his stuff, and he said, and then the aphids, and you literally heard across the entire crowd, oh yeah, aphids. And I mean, like the nerd zen was so thick, but it's where you can go to really help learn what works in your local area. Because I mean, I can't tell you a damn thing about what to grow in Indiana. I don't know that ecosystem. I don't have experience in it. I have a little bit here in Arizona. So find those local resources that you can cooperate with. Those are also oftentimes the people who can show you really good recipes. At that same Herb Association meeting, they did a potluck. I actually ate a pasta with a pesto made from our local mustard weed, London Rocket,
Ooh.
and it was really flavorful. I was very impressed. And so if you're gardening for food, if you're gardening for produce and the like, find those local resources because they have tons of knowledge. And most herb societies are really, from what I've seen, very friendly, very willing to work with anyone and talk to anyone. And so tapping into those local resources is going to be your best way to move forward as quickly as possible with your skills in local in gardening.
Beautiful, beautiful, dude. And I also want to mention for people reading out there, if you guys have any local parks, you can always check with the head of the parks. Like I went to Estrella Mountain Parkway for their botany stuff, and that was a really cool experience. They have a lot of workshops. They'll teach you how to forage. I think they have a once a month event on a Saturday for 3 hours where you can walk around. They'll teach you about like how to forage mesquite beans, where to look for certain
Mm-hmm.
things. And it's funny that you mentioned London Rocket too, because I remember when I was in your plant identification class, I brought it to you, and I was like, "Is this a mutant version of some plant?" And you're like, "No, you should keep looking closer." Because I thought I was convinced that it was some kind of special new plant species I found. I'm like, no, it's just a mustard weed that grows in a ditch. All right. I was just like, it's like the meteorite of plants. I found a new mutant. Like, no, it's just a mustard weed. Books for beginners in botany. I still have all of the books that you recommended to me. I've carried them through like 8 moves. Botany in a Day is one of my favorites, but I want to talk about some of your recommendations for people that are just getting into botany. What books would be good to pick up?
Well, certainly I can't do better than Body in a Day. That is one of the best books. Um, there is one, Plant Families for Gardeners, I believe is the name of it. I recommended it to my sister in Massachusetts, and she has gotten a lot of success out of it. She's doing a lot of gardening now. Um, some of which isn't even cannabis anymore. Uh, so she's growing a lot. Those two books are really honestly some of the best ones I've had. I mean, I've got some other books here that are very specific to the Sonoran Desert, so desert gardening and the like. Again, it's such a hyper local pursuit that you really want to look at some of your local stuff. Um, yeah, and my last warning would be be really careful with how you trust your books. So I had signed up to give a talk on using local plants medicinally. I was in Cottonwood, Arizona. I found this medicinal plant guide, $15 in a bookstore. I bought it. I'm like, okay, I'll read it. I'll get to it. My dog chewed on it, not enough to destroy it, but enough to like really hammer the cover. And I'm like, damn it, I really like the new looking book. I go online and it turns out that book is years out of print, and the cheapest copy you can get is $350. And I'm like, okay, we're going to keep the damaged one, and the dog is going to get a stern talking to.
It's like wow, $350 for the cheapest version of that print.
Yeah, because it's out of print,
It's great.
and people want it. It is crazy. That's one of the things that I think if you're looking for, I mean, if you do a lot of travel to smaller towns and the like, go in those used bookstores. You would be surprised what kind of stuff you find in there.
I have this really old book. I'll take a picture of it and I'll send it to you and I'll post it, the details of it on this video too. But it's an old mycology book for North America, and it's like thick, like green leather bound, everything
Mm-hmm,
smells like old. I
mm-hmm.
think it was printed in like 1920s, and it's just got every single major type of mushroom and what it's used for, how to identify it. It's one of the coolest mycology books I've ever found in my life. So treat your books with respect. You never know what you got. And then
That's right.
there's one more question, and now my brain is like brain farting
Mhm.
on it. All right, here's a good one. So speaking about the next generation of scientists, botanists, people in STEM, what are you hoping they bring to the future? Like how I know it's a dim one, so I would say hope. I know it's probably a broad wide question, but what's your hope for the future for us?
Well, I'd like to see some hope. I would like to see different perspectives. One of the things that I have seen quite a bit in my 25 years at ASU is as we admit there are more than old white men, as we bring people of color, people that fall anywhere on the gender line into it, we get different perspectives. And those different perspectives help us ask different questions and understand things at a better level. And this is universally true across sciences. And so I am hoping that this next generation can continue the fight to the evil acronym DEI, but can continue that fight to be open to looking at different perspectives, because that's where we're going to truly learn. When we keep one perspective and one way, we literally leave knowledge out. My wife is reading a book, I think it's actually called Bitch, and it's about reproductive biology and how all these original studies were done by men and have this very classic male perspective. And yet, if we look just a little closer at the biology, that's not how it works. And so we have been so harmed by our own biases, that I'm hopeful this next generation can help break a lot of those biases open and help us to see things from a multitude of perspectives, because that's really going to advance our work. That's my hope.